Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Thanks for your patience. I'm Victor Mills, Chief Executive of the Chamber. Appreciate your company this morning. Digital transformation. How often in the last decade have we heard those words thrown at us from government, its agencies, from vendors, from all sorts of people? But how many businesses really know what that means and what it involves? So I recently met Simon Dale, who's the Managing Director for Adobe for Southeast Asia. And Simon's with us this morning as our guest speaker to share the Adobe transformation journey and what exactly digitalization means for a business. How do you get rid of all the paper and how do you digitize every process? So I'm going to hand you over to Simon. At any time during his presentation, please feel free to drop your questions in the Q&A function on the Zoom platform. You'll find that at the bottom toolbar on your screens. And Simon, I can see, has won this year's award for the most innovative and colorful virtual backdrop. So Simon, over to you.
Thank you very much, Victor. And good morning. Good morning, everybody. Let me just make sure I'm sharing the right screen and we can get on with it. So hopefully you can see the presentation mode. So thank you, Victor and team, for arranging this morning, and thank you everybody for dialing in for this. It was when I recently met Victor and we were talking about what digital transformation can mean that I offered to share the Adobe story and a little bit of background on why I think this is significant. So I've been in the software industry for 31 years. I've lived in Singapore for 20 of those, and for 16 of those I was with SAP. And SAP was a traditional software company. You sell some software, you give it to the customer, they'd implement it. And about 10 years into that journey, SAP started their transformation to becoming a cloud company, which is a part of a digital transformation. And at the time, I studied Adobe because Adobe was a case study in going first in this thing that was called cloud transformation at the time. Now, I've been at Adobe just almost about a year and been able to study this transformation story. I also did a master's degree which contained a study of change management. And so I'm a bit of a student of transformation, and I find that this story, as an example, is still one of the best stories about what it means to use digital to transform. And that's why I really wanted to share this with you today. I've been telling this story to a lot of our customers since I've been at the Adobe business, and they're finding it very useful, very insightful. And this is not about Adobe's products. It's not about the solutions that Adobe sells as much as what did Adobe do to change those into this new world of digital, cloud, mobile, this kind of stuff. So I'm going to take you through that. So for those of you that are familiar with the Adobe brand, we focus on digital experiences. So if we think about what digital transformation means across multiple industries, right? Even the tech industry has to change. The hardware companies are being changed by the hyperscaler cloud companies like Google and Amazon and Microsoft. And then the software companies have had to change the way they deliver their software and service their customers. So it's not just a technology change. Now, Adobe has always been in the business of helping people to create an experience using digital technologies. It's famous for Photoshop and for the creative tools on video and image editing, as much as it is for PDF, which is a digital document. And through this experience and world of creating content, Adobe saw the opportunity to also offer the capability to its customers to say, well, that's not just the content, but how do you deliver an experience in this digital world as your industry moves to adopt more digital ways to interact. And that's really Adobe's core mission now, is to support people on that journey. So when we look at what can digital transformation mean to many people, right? There's obviously lots of ways. Victor's mentioned about changing your processes. There's documents that people think about with digital. There's certain automation aspects of workflow which can be done. But a lot of it as well is about engaging with your stakeholders in the business, whether they're internal, using better software systems to run your business for your employees, or for your business partners or for your customers. And this interaction with all these digital capabilities, it ends up creating different themes which you can hook your digital transformation to. And as you start to look at these themes, you identify patterns, and you identify areas where you should really focus as foundational elements to support your digital transformation journey. So all of the things we see on the screen here are different ways people look at digital transformation, but there's some common foundation elements. And first of all, the most common one is data. Now, data has been hyped a lot over the past 6, 7, 8 years, and we can talk about AI and machine learning, all this kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, businesses have always been run on data. They've always been run on insights from talking to customers, talking to suppliers, practicing your business and getting feedback. And nothing's changed in the digital world. It's just that the volume of data and the type of data that you can capture and analyze has changed. And so you need to become a company, if you're going on this thing called digital transformation, you've got to be very familiar with what does data mean, how do you manage this data, and in particular, how do you use that data to better interact with the stakeholders in your business. Now, the perspective I'm going to talk about today is more about your customers, right? Because at the end of the day, very few businesses survive without dealing with their customers, serving their customers, acquiring customers, and so on, right? So I'm going to take that perspective. So when we talk about data, it's like, how do you identify not just who your customers are, but what are they doing with your business? And how can you use that insight to improve your services, or to add new services, or to identify areas of the business which maybe you want to defocus and shift resources from to something which is performing well. So that's where the importance of data comes into it. Now, content is slightly different, right? Because content is the thing that you're serving your customer with. That could be just, the information that is talking about your company, your brand, your products, services, or it could be those products and services themselves, right? And when the customers interact with those, the engagement with that content is also throwing off a lot of data, which can enrich the left-hand side about what are people doing and who are they, right? And of course, that content needs to be delivered, and more, there are digital channels which you can take advantage of, build yourself, or outsource to be able to engage with that content. And the challenge there is again, capturing that data and making use of it. And of course, these days, everything's underpinned by machine learning and artificial intelligence. But I would say, don't get distracted by having to learn, unless you are really a tech vendor or you see a competitive advantage in building your AI and machine learning capability in-house. I would encourage you to think about how you get that from people who've invested in it and are building those capabilities into their products and services that you will leverage in the digital world. Now, there's another term that I want to introduce before I talk about the Adobe story, which is this thing called the customer journey. It's very important when I explain the journey that Adobe went through and how you think about maybe your own digital transformation journey. Because a customer journey is something that you can map and you can validate. And there are probably multiple customer journeys. In Adobe, there's 780, right? Or there was when we started looking at it in our transformation journey. And an important step is, which customer journeys matter the most? Where do you want to start, right? In Adobe's case, we identified the most high-value customer journey for us to focus on at the beginning of our digital transformation. We said, hey, there's this type of customer buying these kinds of things from us through these kinds of channels. This is the journey which will return the most in us anchoring our digital transformation on. And that's where we started. And this will be something similar for yourself. You can see here, this is an example of somebody buying a financial services product online, and the various different steps throughout a customer journey that they go through. And you can map this, you can identify those points of engagement and the data points. And as I explain further, you'll see why this becomes important, right? And it doesn't necessarily always have to end up in the digital world. It could still end up in this offline world, but you still have the capability to manage that journey and orchestrate that journey digitally, and using the data that throws off from this in a smarter way. And of course, the other thing about getting all this data is that it allows you to have signals from this customer journey point. And I just want to spend a moment on this example because it'll help you to maybe think about it in the context of your own business. So obviously everybody's on the web, they're searching for things, but when somebody searches for something, usually it's an anonymous search, right? But there are many analytics tools out there which can help you identify what are the search trends. And also, to some extent, what kinds of people, groups of people might be searching for things. And it will give you some insight into the behavior of the population as to what's on topic, what's on trend, what might be something that you could take advantage of to place yourself in the path of opportunity from people searching, right? Now, when you then take this into more the social side of the world and where we have platforms like Facebook and so on, and you start to be able to map more accurately who people are in terms of groups, what kinds of people are talking about specific topics, and it starts to get a richer idea. Now, when you finally get people coming to your website, then you start to have the opportunity to capture your own data about your own customer interactions. Even though they may be anonymous, you can still track where they're coming from and the sources and so on, and you can map it up with that highly anonymous data and start to profile these individuals, which allows you to then become more targeted. And once people interact with your content, you start to enrich an understanding of your customer, and eventually somebody may register with you and authenticate, and then you actually get to identify all of that historical behavior with an individual. And that gives you a very rich profile of who your audience is. And this is how the customer experience is managed in the digital world, because you're able to profile a lot about your customer segments. And you can identify these segments. Once you've identified a segment, then you can decide how you more accurately target that segment. And this is important because in the world of digital and digital customer experiences, personalization is key. And it's the beginning of a major trend now. It's talked about a lot, but we're seeing that only some customers are starting to implement it at scale, and it's becoming more and more of a mainstream capability that you can take advantage of. So I wanted to just set that context, because now I'll talk about the Adobe transformation story. As I said, I was a student of this many years ago, and then now I'm at Adobe. It's actually become something which is published and recognized quite a bit. And Adobe's recognized not just as a technology transformation, but as a business and operating model transformation as well. And I want to take you through how this happened and what some of the key learnings are. There's also a playbook which we published, which you can get access to design your own digital transformation journey, and that's on our website. I can talk about that later. So, as I said, most of you might know Adobe as a creative company, maybe the PDF document company as well. Today, we have 3 cloud businesses, and yes, one is based around that core capability of creating. We have this document world, and then we have this experience digital business cloud as well. And that was created because we were running the first 2. You know, we've got very successful businesses on a large scale with our creative and document products. And as we moved into this world of digital, we realized we needed capability to manage all of this data and all this audience and customer information I just explained. So when we started, though, we were a traditional software company. And what I mean by that is that we wrote software and we released that software once every 18 months onto a CD. It was put into a box and it was shipped through a channel. And so our face time with a customer was at our events. and on a random, semi-annual basis even. So it wasn't an always-on relationship with our customers. Yes, we got feedback and so on, but not from every customer, right? Because we didn't really know as much about who the end customer was buying that box. It was all through layers of the channel. So it was in sort of, the 2007, 8, 9 timeframe where the company said, well, there needs to be a different way of doing business with our customers, and there's this thing called the cloud, and it wasn't called digital transformation back then. But the key fundamental learning and realization of Adobe was that in the world of the early days of the web and this thing called the cloud, it was going to be an always-on channel to the customer. And that was going to provide an opportunity to get closer to the customer, to understand our customers better, and to use that as a way of improving our products and services. And so we had to build not just the technology for that, but also the organization to take advantage of that. And that's really where this journey starts. And that point is the foundational element of the transformation story. So, of course, when we started, though, we weren't designed for this new world, right? We had a traditional setup saying, look, there's people who make the product, people who market the product, people who ship the product, sell it, manage the channel, service the customers, and everybody's doing a great job, but they're all doing it in their own silos. When you orient a company to be very customer facing, all of a sudden you need alignment, right? And so you need to get tight on, well, what am I talking about when I say a customer, and what kind of KPIs are there that need to be standardized across that. So this was the learning at the very beginning of the journey, was we need to really understand the processes as much as we understand the way of interacting with these customers. So we got very tight on defining this new model based on this orientation of customer interaction, getting consistent across our measurements, and also looking at how we reoriented the organization from an accountability point of view. Rather than doing a massive reorg, we said, let's the organization actually worked pretty well, but how do we turn that into an organization which is focused totally on making sure that customers are happy, right? So this is a story of course, technology came into it, and we did a cloud transformation of our products being delivered by services through the cloud and so on. But it was a lot about the data, the people, and the process. So I talked about data earlier, right? And we became the realization that data was getting more and more important. And so we did a couple of things on the people side. One was we started teaching everyone the importance of data, and it's significantly making that data available to everybody. So the democratizing of data and breaking these data silos and so on, even going to the extent of consolidating data specialists into a single team, which became a consistent way of doing things, right? Now, of course, we also had to hire, but we didn't go and replace a lot of people. We took people with us on this data journey and then hired specialists who could take us to the next levels, right? But a lot of things were around the process. And I'm going to go more deeper into the process changes that we made, because if you're a student of change management or an observer even, you will understand that the change management is a process, and that process needs to be managed in a very careful way, and it goes through stages. And to make change sustainable, you need new habits to be built. You need new processes to be built in a company context. And those processes need to be reinforced and become the new company habits. And that's what a successful change management is all about. So it's the process that matters in making change sustainable. And those are the details that I want to take you through. And of course, we had to change our processes to say, well, we're no longer every 18 months do a release and then happily go and work on the next product. This is now always on. So we need to change our agility. We need to change the way our processes hand off with each other and become more efficient. We need to, particularly when we talked about personalization earlier, right? This was a new process, thinking about customer journeys and how we manage those. And of course, building all of the data in that I talked about before. Now, I've talked a lot about what digital means at a high level. Practically to us, remember we started this at the beginning of the web journey, when everyone was orienting towards the web and doing more on the web. And so for us, it started with, well, our shopfront is our website. And that grew and grew. And today, we have 61 sites, 31 languages, as you can see, and we're about the 92nd most visited website in the world. And this focus on getting the content right, getting the platform right to serve that content and scale in serving that content robustly, and also to measure how that content is being engaged with, is why it's so important to have this channel. Now, it's no longer these days just about a website, it's a full omni-channel world. So this could be your mobile channels, it could be the social channels, it could be your own app, it could be third-party ones, it could be just a website on various tablets and devices and so on. But in each case, it's a digital asset that you need to manage in a consistent way to be served through multiple channels of engagement, and you measure that effect. So these things it's a very important foundational element to think about: how am I going to get my content and services to my customers, and how am I going to measure all of that at the same time? So it's a foundational block. Now, as we grew and we went along, then we started looking seriously at customer journeys, and across the top, just a standard marketing way of looking at how you manage your customer journeys. When we started, as I mentioned, we were looking at taking our shrink-wrapped box customers and moving them to become users of our cloud services. So for us, we started on a conversion stage. It was very easy for us because we knew who our customers were, and we used the data that we knew about our customers and the way that we knew they used our products, and we started to convert them to our new business model and our new technical delivery model. And because they were loyal customers, that was fairly easy. Now, of course, as we went on, we wanted to grow. So we said, okay, now we need to go and acquire new customers. So we then had to learn how to deal with anonymized customers. And we started looking at all this world of web analytics, and how do you look at that? How do you build an anonymous segmentation view of your customers and advertise in there and promote and use search and all this kind of stuff? And then how do you merge that with the data that you have on your customers to work out who your segments were? So you see underneath all these different capabilities that we had to start to develop or to acquire and to be able to manage this digital customer journey. It was very easy for us when we were converting existing customers, but when we moved into this more anonymous world of what are people doing in the digital world that we can position ourselves into, it was requiring more capabilities about how do you identify and target specific groups of customers to attract them. Now, as time went on, we became successful at that, but then we started to see a high degree of customers not renewing because we'd started to acquire customers who are not as familiar with Adobe products, and we realized that we needed to invest in activating those customers better than before, because our familiar users were comfortable with taking a new version of the product in a new delivery model. They kind of knew how to use it. But when we started acquiring new people who wanted to create things or digitize things, we realized that they needed activating, they needed enabling training, they needed more ways of getting to learn and be familiar with our products, and also community support. We built quite a large community around for people to help each other as well. And so that became important because when you're in this world of digital services, these days it's not so much. The more and more you digitize your products and services, retention becomes very, very important. It becomes an element that you need to focus on. And a lot of the tech companies are going through this, but a lot of other industries are starting to convert to this business model as well. And if you're in this subscription side of the business, retention is super key, because that's the key to your long-term profitability. And so activating customers is really important to get them on the journey to understanding the value they have and getting to a certain level of value so they're happy to continue subscribing to your product and service. So as you see, this digital world starts to break down the way of you looking at the customer journey. And that's why it's important to have a mind of your customer journey and work out where in that customer journey you're going to focus on what kind of issues you can identify from all this data that's thrown off. So these capabilities underneath in the boxes are important to think about as the foundational elements to take all the data that's thrown off and do something smart with it for your business. Now, as I've mentioned, the segmentation, right? So segmentation applies when you know your customers, but also when they're anonymous, right? And there's a line between managing anonymous data and managing your actual data that you know about the customer, particularly with all of the regulations around GDPR and so on. So these capabilities need to also have governance built into them. Similarly, when you're interacting with the customers and depending on which part of the journey it is, right? Are you advertising to attract people to come to your channels to get into the conversion funnel? Or if they're in the conversion funnel, how are you engaging them to buy? And even when they're an existing customers, right? How do you promote this activation content to them? How do you identify that they maybe need some help to improve the way they use your products and services to get to a point where they're happy to renew? So all of these are different business level applications that your marketing and customer service teams need to be able to be familiar with, and they're new terms in this world of digital customer engagement. So if you're familiar with the world of enterprise resource ERP systems, right? When they're kind of running your business because accounts is automated, supply chain's automated, sales distribution, and so on. This new world of digital customer engagement is like that. It's a suite of applications that you need to either buy or build to be able to assemble to manage this entire customer journey. And these are the different areas that you need to think about in terms of capabilities. Now, then they come together. So when you actually want to do something, those different capabilities combine to look at the kind of activities that your marketing and customer success people want to execute on, right? So am I trying to acquire customers? Am I trying to create a personalized experience? These capabilities talk to each other because the data flows between them and is a closed loop, because when you've done something to a segment, when you've promoted something to a segment, there'll be feedback on that, and you can optimize your segments and optimize the way you personalize that experience. So the topic that comes up here is, how do you manage this data effectively, and how do you make sure that you've got an integrated approach to it? And if you're not careful, you can do a lot of the stuff that I've just talked about in these capabilities, but you end up still with silos of data that then become difficult and get in the way of delivering a good customer experience. So that's where I actually want to go now and talk about, well, how did Adobe do all of this, right? Because we started off going, yeah, there's data everywhere and it all comes together and we need to manage it. But I'm going to come back to this customer journey because it is the foundational element. Now, in the Adobe world, our main customer journey that we started with is this one. 5 journey stages: discover, try, buy, use, renew. And a few fundamental elements to this. As I mentioned, the identification of this was an exercise in itself. I talked about the 780 ways to have a customer journey in the Adobe business. We picked the high value one to start with, and that was a group of sponsors and executives who analyzed the data and said, yep, this is the one that will give us the best results. And so these 5 journey stages. And then for each journey stage, we identified some KPIs. Now, again, a nice little secret to getting this done was we only started with 2 KPIs per journey stage. Today we have over 50. There's 12 core ones, but there's 50 that are useful, right? But those have been developed over many years. But again, a secret of change management is you create some quick wins, right? So you start with a clearly defined scope that is manageable to deliver an outcome. And so just starting with 2 KPIs per journey stage allowed us to implement this entire customer journey and get the organization used to doing this new data-oriented way of running the business. And another key design element, which I found very interesting in this, is that no KPI has weight. So every KPI has equal weight. There's no bias built into these KPIs to say, well, that's the most important one. You know, buy is most important. No, it's not, because what you want is you want the insight produced from looking at the KPIs to tell you where your focus should be. You don't want to predefine that in your KPIs. You don't want to say selling is more important than marketing, which is a great argument to have in most organizations, because the data should tell you that, well, selling is working, but marketing needs a bit of help. Right? That's what the KPIs, having equal weight, do. They allow you to run your business based on the insight that your customer interactions are telling you. And that's super important when you think about this relationship between the KPIs and the journey stages. And you know, obviously tightly governing that and getting everybody to agree to it. Now, the other thing about this is how do you operationalize it, right? How do you take it and you put it into an organization which exists, and you don't want to do a massive disruptive effort to reorganizing if it's working perfectly fine and working good enough, right? But you want to make a few maybe adjustments and so on, but you don't want to do a massive disruptive effort in your digital transformation projects. So as I said, you know, you start by doing very strong sponsorship. This is the customer journey, starting with tight scope on some quick wins. And then you start to get a secret, when I studied change management, was you get this sort of army of people who are going to adopt the change and start to implement it. And the way Adobe did that was to create a matrix of accountability. So there was no reorg here, but what there was the assignment of owners to the journey stages and owners to segments of customers that would pass through those journey stages. And this should be a methodology which is fairly easy to map to your business as well, right? Once you've decided your customer journey, then you say, okay, so in the discover, right, that's going to be, you know, the marketing team will own that. But they don't own everything, right? Because marketing is about getting people into the discover funnel. Buy is sales, right? So sales should be owning the buy, right? The try part, perhaps in our world, might be like product management or product marketing, and so on. So you get the different groups in the organization to own the different journey stages in a coordinated fashion. And the KPIs are designed to get customers to exit the journey stage into the next one. And so a journey stage owner is getting a number of customers to the level of that KPI shown green, so they follow through the journey stage. Now the segment owners are there to make sure that that segment is taken care of consistently all the way through the journey stage. And then this is how this joint accountability makes the system work, because you have people who care really in depth about their particular journey stage and the customer getting the best experience to exit their journey stage to the next one. And then you have people who really focus, for example, here on students. So students, they have slightly different requirements. They'll have slightly different criteria as to looking at the discover than somebody who is interested in just photography, for example. So that's where the segmentation subtleties start to come in and make it easier for you to do targeted aspects of promotions and so on, and subtle different offers and services for those particular segments to make them continue through the journey stage. But it's this operational aspect which is probably the key to making any transformation work, is how do you map your change design to the organization to get them to adopt it. And this is where accountability was correctly assigned across the organization, and then the cadence was set up between these different journey stage and segment owners to inspect the data, to map that data to the actual things going on in the business, and to work out what the data was telling them about how the customers were behaving. So what happens now at Adobe is that this has been a journey where, obviously at the beginning it was agreeing on a single version of the truth, like all the KPIs, where does the data come from? Do we agree that it's the right data? That was done in the early stage. And then once that was agreed on, it was very much about, okay, what is the data telling us? Do we agree that the data is telling us the right thing? What course of action do we take? And this process is a process that everyone is engaged in. As I said earlier, the data is democratized. So we have a single, what we call run the business dashboard with all these KPIs in it, and everybody looks at the same dashboard. They sit in the same meeting discussing the insights from that dashboard, and then they agree on the actions to be taken. And then those are tracked and looked at in the next meeting, right? And it's a common purpose. It's a common framework and a common purpose and a standard way to look at this digital customer environment and how it is operationalized to make the change sustainable in the business. So what have been the benefits? Well, we started this, as I said, in the early days of the web. And so back then it was mostly web browsers, right, on desktops. But as we went through this journey, the data started telling us that a lot of people were coming from mobile devices, and more they were transacting on mobile devices. Now, we hadn't designed that good a mobile experience at the time because, you know, we were a traditional company, we were still learning about the web. So that was an insight that the data told us was a trend that we got ahead of and said, oh, you know what, we need to improve our mobile experience. And that led us to getting a greater engagement through these mobile channels, and has really paid off for us, because now mobile becomes quite a big channel for us to not just transact with our customers, but for our customers to use our products. And we made a significant multi-service surface investment over the past few years to be able to serve more people on these multi-tablet mobile devices. Another thing was interesting for us was, you know, Adobe's quite a strong brand, but we started to understand that people were arriving at the Adobe channels when they were searching for just general terms about creativity. You know, I want to create a photo book or something. So that was when it allowed us to change the way that we acquired customers through advertising. We became more optimized. Instead of just saying, let's advertise the Adobe brand, we were able to understand how to position ourselves in the generic search terms to be able to take advantage of Adobe being positioned as providing a capability which was specifically for what people were searching for. And that allowed us to optimize our spending and our advertising and get a higher conversion rate, which a lot of our customers do. And then the last one here is really where we started to get very smart with the data, right? As I said at the beginning, we implemented a set of education and take our employees with us on this journey to teach them how to get the best out of data. And a lot of that was traditional business intelligence, some advanced analytics and so on. And then as we started to acquire more talent around data science and so on, we started to really get into some in-depth analysis. And these days now, we can start to use that to predict certain elements of customer behavior. And this has allowed us to look at this adoption side with far more science. And I mentioned earlier that in this business of a subscription business, retention is super important to the long-term health and profitability of the business. So being able to really scientifically understand where your customer is on that adoption journey, and are they tracking with a benchmark? You know, are they doing well, or do they need some help? You can start to intervene much earlier in their journey to help them to get value out of your products and to be happy enough to continue their subscription with you. And that's really where this data science starts to become very useful. And just another aside on this, right? The element of using artificial intelligence and so on being built into these products as a result of all this data science work. And some of our customers now are using our capabilities to automatically do A/B testing. We ourselves do about 400 A/B tests on our website every month, thanks to our use of our algorithms and so on. And again, that's how, because the data is helping us to understand better what experiments we can apply and which ones work, and more rigorous feedback and speed to getting these adjustments made to be able to run so many tests and improve our business as well. So we at Adobe have taken a view that AI needs to be built into our products. We have a whole global project called Sensei, and this is where we take the capability of AI to provide it to our customers without them having to build it themselves. As I said about AI at the beginning, right? You can, if you've got the resources and the capability, yes, you can invest in AI talent and data science talent and so on and build it yourself. But there's a lot of complexity in doing that. And also you need the data. If you haven't built up the data reserves, it becomes quite difficult to achieve your AI goals because you don't have the data to train your models. Whereas we've been doing this for so long, we've got over 10 years worth of this digital customer journey data. We can now build on that and use AI to improve our products and services by looking at this and putting that into our products for the people to take advantage of. And so this A/B testing, these automatic personalization algorithms and so on are starting to be built into our customer experience products. So just summarizing a lot of that, what we call this is Adobe's DDOM, the data-driven operating model. And what you need to do if you're going to go on a journey like this, or if you're on it, is ensure that your capabilities are there for your organization to consume all of this and to take leadership positions in applying it to the business, right? So this data foundation means many things, and hopefully I've explained a few of those dimensions to you, right? But it starts with the basics of people being able to get access to all the data that can help them to perform their function, and then building on that to assist them and augment their decision-making capability with the proper use of that data, right? And as I said, our DDOM is partly just getting everybody on the same page and accountable in a coordinated fashion with these KPIs. And a lot of that is basic business intelligence reporting, just put in the right place, in the right order, and a management process around it. It's not advanced data science or anything like that. That's the basics, right? To be able to get this as a sustainable change. Once you've got that, then you can go on these more advanced journeys and look at where they could have targeted outcomes by using your data. But if you're going on an organizational transformation, then it's a combination of getting the data to the right people in the right place at the right time and managing the outcomes from the insights that that data is providing to the people who need to go and take action. That's really the secret to this transformation. Starting this, of course, is like any change management project. You need a strong sponsor. You need a team that's actually going to get it done. People need to buy in across the organization. And as I shared, right, this accountability of the journey stages and then the segments is what worked at Adobe. And it may be something that you could look at for your own organization as well. And this does have to be something which is made sustainable, right? So it's very much that the governance that Adobe has put around this is not massive, right? We only have a small team that actually governs this entire data-driven operating model and make sure that best practices are captured and syndicated. But it's the scaling across the organization which has been key to getting all of this done. Now, one last thing to share is to get more about this entire capability that I've talked about. If you're more interested in going deeper with the story, then we're happy to share more about the DDOM story in detail to help your organizations. If you've got executives or teams, transformation teams and so on, as I said, I've been doing this in quite a few companies across Singapore and Southeast Asia and getting a lot of good feedback from people understanding the details and being able to apply it to their business. We also have an event coming up very soon called Experience Makers, which is free. And a lot of our customers who do similar things to us using data and managing these digital experiences will be presenting. Quite a few Singapore customers, the Singapore Tourism Board, Media Corp, and so on, will be speaking there in DBS. And they'll be sharing how they are using data to manage their customer experiences digitally as well, and the journeys they've been on. And also I mentioned this DDOM playbook. So if you go to the Adobe website as well and look for our CXM, so Customer Experience Management Playbook, then you'll be able to look at getting your own mini version of this story and being able to look at how it might apply to your business, your industry, the type of process that you want to implement. and that may be useful to you as well as you go on that particular journey. But with that, I'll finish the formal part of the presentation and just say, if you're looking at going on digital transformation, I hope that some of these have given you some practical insights and ideas, and I'm happy to get into the Q&A part of the session now. So back to you, Victor.
Thank you very much, Simon, and thanks for the presentation. It's very interesting, a very interesting approach. So starting with data, a lot of businesses that I talk to are very sensitive about their data. And you talked about democratizing that data, making it available. A lot of smaller businesses are very nervous of doing that because they're concerned about confidentiality. They're concerned, in other words, about control of that data. How did Adobe manage, or how do you manage that in your business?
Yeah, so we've got, obviously, being a B2C company as well as a B2B, but mostly coming from a B2C background, right? We were always very conscious about protecting our customers' data. So I on the sort of color chart slide, I talked about the fact that you've got a lot of anonymous data in the digital world, which you can capture, and there are no rules around that because you don't know who the person is generating that data, but you can use it to generate insight to your business. Now, you then obviously have data about your customers, and you can also anonymize that, and you can use that to create profiles of customers rather than the customers themselves. Now, obviously, then you've got to put very strong governance and protection around your internal data. But the important thing is to think about the insights from the data and not the data itself. So long as you set yourself up with enough security and governance to protect your internal customer data and comply with regulations around that, you can still anonymize that by analyzing it and producing the insights about what type of customers buy what type of product when, right? That's just group anonymous data you can derive from that. And that becomes useful when you want to enrich your segments. When I talked about the customer journey and profiling the segments, you already know a lot about your customers, but you can know a lot more if you marry your internal data up with some of this external data. And that's just an anonymization process, and you should be able to protect yourselves in that.
So this may sound like a stupid question, but I have to ask it. If the data is anonymized, how do you know what type of customer is logging on, or what they're doing on, for example, your website or any other platform that you have?
Well, again, it's are they authenticated or not, right? So people who are arriving at your website to browse something haven't necessarily identified themselves. So you can still capture that, right? And you can find out where they came from. You could maybe identify they may be a millennial or male or female or something like that, but it's some insight which you can merge with your broader data set. If they've authenticated on your website, of course, that's now you know who they are, and you have to put different protection mechanisms around that. But you can still strip the person from all of that behavior and pool that behavior data to understand the segment behavior, because that's the important thing. The important thing is people like my existing customers, you usually want more of those because you know that that's a good customer, right? So you can use a lot of this data in what you know about your customers in an anonymous fashion to be able to find more customers like them. Now, you can use the same principle, and yes, you have to protect it and govern it a lot tighter when you're doing something with your own customer data. But similarly in the retention side of the business. So you want to know which customers may be at a risk of going somewhere else, right? And then go and talk to them. And that's a normal way of your business. It's part of customer service. So you have to know who your customers are then, right? But that's a different part of the business process and part of the customer journey, where it's perfectly acceptable because you've got all the customer data and you know that the particular behavior has triggered you'll need to talk to them. But it's how you expose that data. And I can completely get people's concerns about that and where it can be taken. But that's when internal controls around data governance start to become very important. And a lot of products have this stuff built in to ensure that you're not breaking GDPR rules or anything like that.
Yeah, thank you. Let's take a couple of questions from the floor. KG Lim wants to know what do you mean by segment PII? It was on one of the
yeah. So sorry, PII is personal data, right? So this is the if we go back to that slide, let me take you back to that one so I can answer the question in context.
Okay. And then Robin's got a question. What was Adobe's biggest challenge after training the staff in helping them to use the data to make decisions and digital changes? How do you overcome all of these challenges?
Yeah. Okay. So let me just answer the first question by going back to this one. So you see at the bottom there, I've got, oops, this has come up on my screen. Now I think you may have lost my slides.
You want your slide deck back, do you?
Yeah, it's okay. But when I was talking about the PII and CRM, so this is where the world of CRM and marketing gets a bit blurred, right? Because people think CRM is good enough to manage the customer, all customers. And CRM is only good enough to manage the customers you know. But in the world of digital customer management, there's a massive amount of anonymous customers that you want to manage the data for to be able to convert them into customers. So a CRM system is only useful when you know exactly who the customer is. And it's built to govern the data around that customer, protect it, and so on. But it tends to have very limited capability to give you the insights to go and find new customers or to serve those customers better with behavior data. CRM is a workflow product. It's not a deep analytical product. So everything has to be bolted on, right? And then when you start bolting things on, you get into data silos because I've got my silo of my customers I know, and then there's this separate silo of customers I don't know. You need to bring them together. And that's why we talk about that segmentation layer requiring the anonymous world. You want to be able to segment what's going on in the world, and that's very, very high volumes of anonymous data, and then what's going on in my world, and then bring the two together to get a richer view. So it's important to marry your good customer behaviors with what you know will improve your business with what's going on outside, so that you can find the people who have a higher propensity to convert to a paying customer. Now going to the second question, I'd say, one of the biggest issues at the beginning of the journey was just getting everyone to agree what was a single version of the truth, right? And so sometimes I co-present this with my Chief Marketing Officer, Jenny Lim, who's based here in Singapore. And she honestly talks about the fact she's been with the company 10 years. And for the first year or so, she would walk into meetings and marketing would bring their report, which was a day older than the guys from product, and it'd be slightly different. And you'd be arguing over who got the right data and whether it was, the problem was already solved or not. So there was an exercise of just getting everybody to agree that the single version of the truth was in a single place that everybody had access to. That was a key fundamental building block. Once the design was agreed on, a key first implementation was, we're all going to look at single version of the truth. We're all going to commit that we believe this is, and the insights are correct. That was an exercise in itself. And once everybody got to that stage, the operationalization of it became a lot easier because you were all agreeing the data was something you all agreed on. So then, right, okay, so now we can decide on what the actions are without getting distracted by, is the data good enough or not? Key thing. And then it really became about just making sure that people understood their accountability in that matrix approach that I showed, where it's, why is this KPI important and how do we get to it? And that became an exercise of getting people to forecast consistently. Because the interesting thing about the KPIs in this model is the financial targets are set, but mapped to the KPIs. There's a relationship, but the KPIs are not set by the finance people. Finance says, hey, I've got these business goals. You operational guys decide what KPIs will meet these business goals. And the interesting thing about this is that once, Adobe's been doing this a very long time, is that we can react very quickly to a change in the market, right? We can actually sense more because the feedback mechanism is built in. It's all digital. So you can see these KPIs, you can see them tracking and the trends. And it's very easy to respond to a change in that digital behavior. Whereas, when data's all over the place, you have data logistics, which take longer for you to derive insight. And so your business runs slower. And so the advantage of consolidating this and doing it all in one place is you get a far faster business and you can respond more quickly to trends in the market.
Yeah, that's great. What would you say were the sort of the biggest insights for the team in terms of building everything you do around responding to your customers' needs? What was the sort of biggest insight that that like that light bulb that goes on and you suddenly think, my goodness, yes, this is something we really do need to address?
Well, they came at different points in the journey. I mentioned about when we started, it was, well, we have an existing customer base. It's just a new version of the same thing. That's essentially how we started, right? Yeah. And it was only when we started to say, well, growth needs to come from new customers, that we had to go, okay, there's a difference now between the conversation we had just a few minutes ago, the data we know about our customers, and then the data that we can get about people who aren't our customers yet. There was this whole new world of data that you can go and get access to, which allows you to understand what's happening in the digital world, which you could put yourself in the path of opportunity of. Right. So for example, we have a product called Adobe Analytics, which we publish a report every month now on the trends in e-commerce, right? Because it's used across many of the major e-commerce websites in the world. And you can go into this and go, well, what are people buying? Is it something I can manufacture, or is it a trend over there that might come to Asia, so can I build something here? So it's that kind of stuff. And you don't need to do anything yourself. You don't need to build a system. It's a service you can subscribe to, right? And that would give you the insight to plug into what you know about your business and your customers and say, oh, it looks like there's some behavior going on where I've got something my customers already proven I can make a business out of, so why don't I market to those groups of people that I didn't realize were out there, right? So it's that joining the what you know versus what you can get access to together to improve your business opportunities.
Thank you. A couple of more questions. Iqbal wants to know, can we get a copy of your slides?
Yeah, there'll be a copy coming after this.
Lovely, thank you. KG Lim is back again. He wants to know, in your matrix organization structure you have, who owns the budget? Is it the stage lead or the segment lead?
Yeah. It's the stage lead, right? And I mentioned a second ago, right? So our financial targets are set, and then they are given to these leads, and the segment and the journey stage lead discuss what the KPI targets should be for the segment, right? And then they add them all up, and then they agree. So the segment lead is looking for alignment across all the KPIs to deliver the financial outcomes for his segment, right? And the journey stage lead is saying, well, I have a budget for doing this, and that's the amount of the KPI I can do with that budget. So it's the journey stage leads own the actual organization to execute. So they have the budgets, right? Because they execute on meeting the KPIs. As I said, they're exit KPIs at the journey stage. So it's the combination which sets the targets of the KPIs, but it's the journey stage people who own the resources to actually get it done.
Okay, thank you. One last question, and that's from Vincent. What are the key differences in Adobe's culture before and after the transformation? And what were two key challenges during the transition, and how did Adobe resolve them?
Well, I'd say, I mean, I've not been at Adobe that long, right? But if Janie was here, right, she could give you the 10-year answer because she's lived through it. But I get the impression from similar questions we've had when I've been with her that the culture at Adobe hasn't changed that much, right? It's always been a very humble culture, which has been focused on helping people get the best out of their digital technologies. And I think that was why when this journey began, it was very quick for Adobe to realize that it was going to be a 24/7, always on relationship with the customer, because they were already focused on the customer, but now they realized, well, we're going to get closer. So that's going to, if we don't build this back end infrastructure and organization to manage that, then we're going to fail in our customer experience. So we've really got to get that right. That was kind of the fundamental thing. If you look at it, and again, I'm newish, but Adobe hasn't really failed on that journey. There may have been some challenges along the way, but the one thing, when I studied them at the beginning, they were still in this revenue dip. The market was still going, will they make it? Are they going to come out the other side? Because they had to take the revenue hit. They signaled it to the market and said, hey, look, this subscription business is different. I can't take $1, I have to take 30 cents, right? And that's going to be 3 years. So you're going to have to wait for the dip to come back, and then we'll show you growth and so on. In February, Adobe became the second largest software company in the world by market cap, exceeding SAP and Oracle. And because it's through the transformation, and that transformation is now scaling. So obviously there would have been challenges along the way. I wasn't part of it. But as I said, the biggest one was getting everybody on the same page, agreeing that it was a single version of the truth. And of course, you can imagine, right, that was silo busting. That was, this is my data, I'm not sharing that. All those kinds of things would have gone on. But they got through that, and then it was purely the usual things about just making sure people are accountable and getting used to the new organizational habits. The great thing I see out of this, it did not require a massive disruptive reorg, which would have created a lot more problems than you probably needed to have.
Thank you very much. That was great. Vincent's got one follow-up. It would be interesting to know if organizations start with a culture that is very different from what is desired. And in that case, where do organizations start? That's an interesting question.
Yeah, look, as I said, I've been a bit of a student of change, and I think it's interesting now. I'm seeing a lot of customers at different stages of this journey asking us to come in and then help them with our capabilities and so on. But that's also why I started telling this story, because it's not an easy answer. Change isn't easy, right? So, for example, one of the large banks here in Singapore, my CEO his very last business trip came through Singapore, and we visited some of the banks here. And we talked about this data-driven operating model at the CEO level. Since then, we're probably on our 10th or 11th telling of this story to the transformation teams, to the marketing teams, to the IT teams. And slowly, they're all sort of getting their head around that they all need to work together on this. It's an organizational transformation. Now, they were doing pockets of it. Right? This was silo, but it was silo. So the great thing about this is I could come on here and I could talk about my banking customers, my telco customers, but I don't know the exact journey they've been through. What I've told here is a story from more or less end to end, which has got a lot of depth to it, and we really do have layers and layers that we can take our customers through, and it's authentic, right? Because you can see that Adobe's been very successful in the market as a result, So it's got some merit to it. And just that, gets the light bulb on in some execs in these organizations to go, okay, I'll listen to the story. And then they ask their questions. And what you've got there is you've got people engaged on the transformation. And then once you've got a sponsor who's saying, you need to listen to this, you need to go and do something, and it doesn't have to be that they completely adopt the Adobe way of doing things, but it's helping our customers to make it real and realize the value of a holistic approach across a customer. Now, some organizations might not be ready for that, right? They may not have gone through those early failures or early learning steps, or they may not have a strong enough sponsor who can coordinate everybody together. But that's what the world is about, is we find paths, and sometimes you can't control timing, you just have to wait.
Simon, thank you. Really appreciate you being here today and sharing what is a terrific story, and made all the more real by how successful your business is. So congratulations.
Well, thank you for the opportunity, and happy to take any more follow-up questions from anyone.
Thank you, and wish you continued success. And in terms of all our audience, thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for your time this morning. You'll see on the screen, let us know how we can help you further in terms of content, in terms of connections, in terms of topic coverage. We're here to help. Thank you very much, and we look forward to seeing you very soon. Thank you so much. Bye-bye, everybody. Take care.
Bye, everyone.